Okay, we'll bring this meeting of the JMRL Board Policy Committee order. And I don't believe we have any remote participants today.
Not today.
So we can continue. We've been discussing the Monticello Avenue Community Information Network, or also known, I think, as the Virtual Village. And I think, David, we asked for some kind of staff research, and I think we'll start with you kind of telling us what we found between then and now.
Yeah, so after the last meeting of the policy committee, Brad and myself and Kayla and Sarah from staff met and started to formulate a plan. And the first step of that plan was to reach out to all of the users of avenue.org, the community groups that are using it. And we've done that in 2 waves. I sent out an initial communication and got some responses back, and then Fred followed up with a second communication from avenue.org. And we've heard from more than half of the respondents, and I'll share, Fred shared some information from them that I'll share with you all now. But the bottom line of it is that several of the organizations are going to need a significant amount of hand-holding, which is not unexpected. But if the service is planned to go away within the next few years, I think a good bit of Fred's time within that period is going to be helping these groups to find other solutions. So I'll go through the data now, or Fred, you can help me to just share here.
So, but one thing I'm hearing, it sounds like there's probably not a one-size-fits-all solution where we can hand you an information
document saying here's what your group needs to do.
Well, if you did that, it would be personalized. It's not a one-size-all. Like, here's the 3 things you can recommend.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation of what we found. Basically, we had some folks that reached out and said, this makes sense. I've already got some plans in the works and we're fine, give us a few months. And then we had some that reached out and said, we are going to desperately need a lot of assistance. We don't know, we don't have a webmaster, or our webmaster's gone, or we're a 3-person volunteer organization, etc. Fred, you have a look of consternation. Is this not the correct?
I think you might be using the old slide.
Okay.
Did
you update?
I did. I'm sorry. I added in some that came over.
All right. Well, so this is not going to be the most up to date, but we can discuss that as we go through. Okay. So the questions were, does your organization actively use MonAv? Pretty much everybody that responded came back with, yes, we're using this as the tool we're using. Would you require assistance transitioning to a new service? More than half said yes, they needed some sort of help there. What would your budget be for a new service? So this was, I think, a good suggestion to Fred's to figure out kind of what we're looking at for them. You know, if they have millions and millions of dollars, then we can hire them the finest. We can't hire them, but we could put them in touch with some fine design services. Most of them, no money for this project. They have been using the free web service for decades, so they haven't had to budget for any web design.
Well, let me ask you, Fred, maybe you can weigh in. If a new service would not, there's web code, there's code that they have that's hosted. It's more about transitioning that code to hosting is more what we're talking about, rather than necessarily re-implement.
Yeah.
Although various hosts are going to have specific
costs.
Well, specific implementation requirements.
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically the costs associated.
Yeah.
Like right now, they're not paying for any domain name.
Right.
So there are just kind of built-in costs for having a website that are not necessarily tremendously expensive, but right now they're free. So if you have Mike's Group at avenue.org, you don't need to buy mikesgroup.com, but they're going to have to pay for.
Okay.
Or find some other alternative to provide them free domain.
Again, just clarifying, these costs that are going to be transitioned are mostly in the category of hosting.
Not necessarily, right? So like one of the things that we talk about when we talk about like the JMRL website, how it has also like Trumba and the do they have a calendaring need? Like, so one of the things that was included in like what we talked about, like the different parts of the service. And so one of the things going forward, not to like skip ahead too much about action items, was sort of like completing this information gathering phase, complying usage data, but also like user needs assessment of additional technical requirements for the partners, like widgets, video streaming, calendars, like what other like services that we're offering that they have.
So some of those we're also offering already.
Well, yeah, so it's like they have like there's like churches who have their sort of the masses that are posted on, right, or a calendar or
So do we offer Trumba as one example? Are there like Trumba sub accounts that?
It's not actually the Trumba service. I'm sorry, it's a different calendaring service. I was just
So it's a calendaring
Maybe
service
look it
that we're offering as part of the hosting. Okay,
Is it fair to say most of them are WordPress? Is the calendaring a WordPress, what do they call them, module or something like that, plugin?
yeah, some are using WordPress plugins.
So in that sense, Mike, some of them already have kind of a website that's designed for
Yeah.
porting right over, but inside that, they might have things that customize it. Bottom line, though, most of them are going to need to plan for some expenditure of funding. Okay, and then in terms of what would you need from JMRL for this? And Fred, if you have data that's like significantly changed these, then let me know. But finding free or low cost hosting services, they help us find some things, help us with some technical assistance. Finding another kind of hosting service, so that's not free or low cost. How long are you going to need to keep using this service if the library stops offering it? Pretty much everybody is in the, what's this top right?
That is 2 to 3 months.
2 to 3 months. So
it's a small percentage that.
Small percentage that are ready to move relatively quickly. The rest anticipate needing a while. So those are pretty much the responses that we got. Like I said, we had more than half of the folks reach out after the first communication, and then Fred has been following up with the rest of the users since then. There are a few that we still have not spoken to, that we haven't been able to get in touch with. So there's a little bit more work in the very initial data gathering phase. But my takeaway is that this is a doable project, but it's going to take some amount of time and library staff resources, and that it's going to have to be done effectively. We had talked a lot about putting cohorts together, like these 2 or 3 are in kind of a similar boat. They have this type of site. We can help them transition together. But doing 20 plus sites, even if it's 2 or 3 at a time, we're looking at a year-long plus maybe project. So I think then what the policy committee has to decide is, what does that mean for this policy? Because right now there's a policy saying JMRL has to offer this service. Gets to offer this service. And we are providing this service to the public. So my thinking at this point is that the policy committee would recommend to the board that we remove this particular policy, which would allow staff the flexibility to start implementing a transition plan for these groups. As long as that policy is in place, though, they're obligated.
When was the last time a new organization?
So we've gotten requests, but I personally put a pause on new member organizations, partially in light of some of these conversations, until we made a decision about the future of the service. But it's not, there has been organizations that have requested to join the service since I started, at least.
Do you have an idea of how many organizations since you've been there?
Just a handful.
So we haven't had any new onboarded organizations since you began.
Yeah, I haven't, I redirected them to other services because of the uncertain nature of the service.
And I'm not sure. I don't think your predecessor was subject to either. I think the ones that we're talking to now have all been there for at least a few years.
I wasn't here last.
Oh, yeah.
policy meeting, but and we're all in agreement that we need to phase this service out, right? Is that right?
So the question at hand here is actually just so it's the sort of every 5 years this policy comes up
Right.
for review.
Right.
And I think in general, it's one that I think as a board, they've been moving these sort of kind of like nitty gritty policies more into like a procedural realm. And so there's, I think, two things at hand. One, the actual like handoff of the service. And I think before getting rid of the policy, I think one of the things they wanted to talk about was like how it would happen.
I guess what I'm asking is,
Yeah.
does staff feel a consensus that this service is not really appropriate for? That fair to say?
It's fair from my point of view. Yeah, I don't think that I think that this is a wonderful service that we've offered to our community for a long time,
Right.
but that this is not necessarily a core service forward.
Didn't it also have something to do with the expenditure for another piece of equipment to replace?
Yeah, there's a
the
server
dying- Yeah, dying
Host
equipment.
these that's end of life, that the board did budget for a replacement for this year. But at this point, if moving forward, we're working on transitioning these folks, probably would not spend that money for that server. I forget what the cost was, right?
There's just a couple of $1,000, just for a new server, and which theoretically could, even if we're working on a transition plan, like sort of be that like handoff time that they're asking for.
Yeah.
To like sort of gently.
But I think you're right, Anne. No, we haven't voted or decided finally, yes, we're keeping the service, or no, we're not gonna offer the service. So that's the fundamental first question. And so last meeting, when that comes up, we want to understand the impact on these users and on the library if we were to decide to
Yeah.
deprecate the service. And that was sort of the purpose of David's report
Yeah.
to the movie.
Honestly, the answer to that is that we found that I think there's like what 86.7% of them are like actively using the service, like and that there is sort of
But I think the question to me, and the thing I would add to the bullet points you mentioned, Martha, is and David, it's not a question of whether this is a useful service that people need. It's a question of do they in today's world, as opposed to 20 years ago when this started, are there alternatives that are affordable and reasonable? And I think the technological environment of the world is that there's many other free services, free or low cost. There are many other options for these folks. So that's I think it's probably similarly connected to our mission and values, but it's just the alternative need for that. It
What
could be
resources can be used for other things?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the main focus of this department is on the digital media lab and makerspace that Fred runs, building. And this is part of the duties of that department, but we have seen decreased usage. And that doesn't mean that the folks who rely on it and need it, I mean, that came through very clearly in their responses here. So I wouldn't want any scenario in which we're pulling a rug out on anybody. Hence my hesitation. I think organizationally, staff is going to need time in order to try to figure out the best solutions for each of these groups, rather than just saying like, here's a list of websites. But that can't really happen with this policy written as is. So, and ultimately, this is a board level policy saying we're going to do these things, and the board has to say yes or no. We'll have this forward, yeah. But I think they will probably take a recommendation from this group.
I think I'm comfortable to deprecate based on the conversations that, yes, it's going to be an impact on some people, but I'm not hearing, hey, we're pulling a rug that can't be replaced, substituted market. So I'm okay with that, but I think that's the first thing to decide.
I think I'm okay with deprecating it as well. Knowing that we're going to assist the people who are currently using the service, which does mean, a lot of time that is going to be contributed by our staff. But then that time is going to be able to transition into where we're moving, which is makerspace and that kind of service, rather than, and, with developing websites myself or my family, I know that, there are a lot of point and click and pretty easy ones to do. I think deprecating is a move that I would support.
I think you're, the future of our, what we call Monticello Avenue is expanding and diversifying. Exciting, really. We don't even know what it could be. So if you could help those people, I'm sure, I would be scared to death if somebody said, I'm sorry, but, we're not gonna be there for you anymore, because it's not my thing. But if somebody would say, I'm sorry, but we're gonna phase this service out, but I'm gonna help you land on your feet, and you'll probably be better off. Than the way you've been. Yeah, so that's good.
I think a lot of these organizations that we found in the past month or two, they just don't have somebody that's dedicated in their volunteer group to organize. Some of them are very small volunteer organizations where it's like 3 or 4 people running everything. So they don't have those skills.
Yeah.
And part of that is maybe trying to help them connect with other volunteer groups that would be interested in their mission, plus have some of those skills too.
I can imagine.
How does this tie in, the transition effort tie in just with general technological literacy services that we offer? So if someone came in, maybe it's not a website, I don't know what I'm thinking about that. Maybe you can help me with an example and say, hey, I have this need to understand how to use technology in a certain way. Do we have appointment-based services, or how would that work?
Yeah, it's largely appointment-based services where they would sit down.
It sounds like it's just a subcategory of that. It's something that we've already doing in some sense.
And I think this project will help us develop a more, not cookie cutter approach, but a more like we'll know more about it in the next year than we do at this point about what different size organizations need and how to right size their needs.
Okay, so then if that's the decision that we don't need to require staff to offer this service, then we would just recommend at today's board meeting that we deprecate this policy because it only deals with this virtual village service. And then it'll be up to staff to proceed along the lines that they described in terms of helping transition the works. And there's no particular time frame from a board level that we're attaching to that. It's turned over to staff at that point. Okay, any last thoughts on that? Okay, so that, just moving into our agenda, that opens up the question of, well, we have this thing called Monticello Org, and it's a makerspace, and we have various other makerspaces. And to me, I think there's two kind of, and Camille put together some research or links to what we see from other peer or near peer and state organizations. What are they doing? To me, there's kind of two categories of things that might be worth writing down, but I want to throw those to the group and talk about should those be at a policy level or some other level. The second of two is, because I'm going out of order, many of the links, Camille, that I saw were sort of, were not necessarily policy. Some of them were phrased as policy, but a lot of them were more like conduct in the library type, which is a policy that we have. But there were some makerspace specific. Here's what you, as a user of the makerspace, rules you need to abide by. There was like some things about intellectual property, which I think is probably useful to have written down somewhere.
No guns.
Yeah, no guns. I got to kick out of. Don't do things that are illegal, but also just hey, we require you to and I think we also do this at JMRL, it's my impression, we require you to have a certain level of expertise. You've gone through a training session with staff, or you've done this remote training module or whatever. So David, tell me what we have in place currently that addresses that sort of how to use Makerspace. Is it? My impression is it might be different for Makerspace because of staffing and so forth, but yeah, maybe you can say a few
Yeah,
words.
so we have 3 separate areas that would fall under the umbrella of Makerspace. There's the Monticello Avenue that we've been talking about, which is the physical space on the mezzanine of the central library. And we have the teen Makerspace area here at the Northside Library. And then a Makerspace that largely falls in a kind of business center capacity at the Nelson Memorial Library. So each of them have slightly different equipment for one, like they have different offerings for the public, different machines in different places, slightly different like day-to-day usage depending on hours and staffing that are available there, and then slightly different procedures for how to interact with those things. So I think that has worked okay for the most part. Especially like my concern would be in the Charlottesville area between the Central Library and the North Side Library, but because this one is in the teen area, it's designated for all 12 to 18-ish age. And the one downtown is part of the overall services there. We haven't had a lot of conflict where people are saying, and Fred, speak up if I'm wrong, people are saying, well, over there I have to do this, over here I have to do this. And because of the distance of the Nelson Memorial Library, it has not been an issue. Although I do know there are people that travel in order to. So I had the same impression about these resources here, is that they were largely kind of procedural, focused on like how to access the resources. So to me, that just says that we need better kind of web documentation of like, here's how. We've got a really great list of here's all the services that are available in these spaces, but some language about how to access them and making it clear to people what the requirements are.
Would that be procedures enough?
Yeah, I think even if we were to write a policy, we wouldn't want to get that bogged down in it,
You're thinking of having links, like having a policy and then links to.
To be honest, I'm not sure I see the need for a policy here, an overall policy. If there were to be a policy, I think it would be something along the lines of JMRL is going to offer maker spaces and here's why, like a very
That's my part one that I'm gonna.
couple sentences, like maybe a paragraph, because the details of it, like for the policy we're just talking about, like those are very much going to have to be fluid too. Yeah,
I'm sure. But I'm sure other branches, I'm sure. I mean, I was impressed with Nelson's. I thought that was. And so
Physical
I
space.
think a small library, other like Louisa's, that they're gonna probably want, and Green will probably want
There's no space.
some kind of.
Space, both
Great.
Northsides and Nelson's are direct outputs from the construction projects there, the renovations. Like an
Yeah.
architect sat and looked at it and worked with JMRL and said, you should have a makerspace here.
Yeah.
Great, carve out some space for it.
But I'm sure, anyways, I think more of the branches eventually will have makers. I think we should have a policy for sure.
There was
That says what,
one that
what
had-
the kinds of things we're offering and why we're offering.
There was one of these, I don't recall which one, that did have a kind of policy statement to it.
Yeah, there was it's a definition, if we're thinking about the same one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my part one, I'm interested in just having written down somewhere, and is policy the right place, possibly. Why because we're allocating resources to this, and a fair amount of resources, their staff and space is being allocated out of our library system. So I think it's worth having written down why that allocation of resources ties in with our mission and values. Hey, funding jurisdictions, here's something you can expect us to be doing and why we're doing it. And just kind of a simple statement of definition, scope, and motivation. And as you said, David, I've seen we've been slowly we have these other policies that are very detailed, like bookmobile, and say this is the hours and this is and so that doesn't really work at a policy level because it's too prescriptive and detailed. So I wouldn't put that type of thing. Now there's a question of if we had that, are there general conduct guidelines that would apply to all makerspaces that aren't already in conduct? Then that might be a place to stash some of those if we know that those are going to be evergreen principles.
Yeah, I was just gonna go back to the webpage where this information is. There's a general statement there about liability and makerspace and digital media lab liability that touches on the intellectual property aspect, which I think should be stated as maybe part of the policy. You know, anything that's infringing on intellectual property of others in US copyright laws prohibited by local, state, or federal law. And then it refers to the conduct policy as, you know, you can't, the things that are inadmissible in the rest of the library are not allowed in the Maker Lab either. And then to Ann's point, some of these maker spaces have become available because the number of public computers that we're offering at some of these places, it's declining. So that might provide space or opportunity for a maker space at Louisa or at Green as we need less public computers, because that's what happened at Central.
Yes, my long-term concerns though were about being able to effectively hire and compensate staff to manage these things.
Because it's a lot of
It's a lot of
skill and
work.
ability, yeah, knowledge.
It's a full-time thing, you know, helping people use this equipment. The staff have to have a level of familiarity with it, which is not something that they're currently, it's not in a, you know, for the specialists
Competencies,
at the Nelson Memorial Library. They don't have competencies that say you need to
Know
know
how to use all
this
these things.
equipment. You know, we're gonna get this new thing, so, you know, my only concern with the policy is setting forth a document saying the board is saying that this must happen at, you know, at all these locations, because I think about the Scottsville Library, the Green, you know, so say we carved out place in the Green Library, well, then staff have to be able to help people use all this equipment. They have to have expertise with it. And
And that's a
currently,
challenge.
it can be a challenge, and currently the staff doesn't have a lot of like free time to be doing that. So it means staffing up as well, which is not something that we can promise without jurisdiction support.
I was about to say, isn't it true that each makerspace is in some way individually funded by the jurisdiction? Kind of similar to bookmobile routes.
Only Nelson is, and they're not funding something special. They're just funding the staff that work at the Nelson Memorial Library. They're not funding a new position to help manage those things. And Charlottesville, Albemarle are paying for Central and Northside.
Because of what I'm thinking is if there were a policy, I agree that we want to have the right balance of we want to communicate to the public and jurisdictions why we might be doing some of these things without being prescriptive.
Yeah, I don't want to get into a situation like
Yeah,
the one we
right.
just
Yeah,
talked
we have to
about.
do that.
Right.
So it would sort of say something along the lines of, which I think is also similar in the bookmobile, where jurisdictional funding permits, these are ways that we might allocate some of those funds and why. But I absolutely agree it would need to be written in a flexible way, so we're not prescribing a service that we can't commit to across the board.
I think it's also important to have it in policy because I think a lot of the patrons still look at the library as being books only.
I was just gonna mention.
You know, this says that, you know, the library is a repository of knowledge and constantly expanding knowledge, and technology is part of this knowledge wave.
I agree with that statement, and it's been on my mind a lot recently because last week, did you all see there was an article in it was in the New York Times about a library in Maine that has a library of things, and it was a really nice, very long article about this service that they're providing for this small town, and 1 million people reached out to me and said, "Oh, we should do this." So all of them said, "Here it is." I said, "Oh, you should get better media coverage," and I wrote back, "Well, here's the article in the Daily Progress about it last, you know, in March." And this and that. So I agree with you, Martha. That's part of the problem that public libraries have in general. I don't know that policy is the place that people go to find that. So the only reason I slightly hesitate on adding a policy here is that the library does offer a lot of services that aren't governed by policy, like that library of things, just for an example. You know, we circulate something that's like not a book, and it doesn't require a board level discussion about whether or not to do it. Like, I don't know, I think there's probably a line somewhere where it's like, okay, this is important enough as bookmobile service that we need to address this. I don't know why. A line of bookmobile service, because that's a huge cost and it's something that people expect. So is the line above or below makerspace? I'm not sure. It's not, we don't need a library of things policy, I don't think. Then do we need
But if we're investing in 3D printers and sewing machines and, I mean, I did have a conversation with some people and said, oh, at my ripe age, I could learn how to sew because the library has a sewing machine and I can go in there and learn. And they were like, wow, why does the library have sewing machines? That's where you go to get, books. And so I had to explain that the library is more than that. And there was some pushback and I think some of it was the cost of some of those things. And I talked about, I said, oh no, we got some really great things there. And that made me really realize that I think we do need a policy for it.
Okay, I mean, that's a good argument.
In my opinion, I think, so that we can be more flexible in investing in these maker spaces.
It's a compelling argument.
And it's not just the investment in the object, the tool. It's the space and it's the staff and the staff
And
training.
the staff, yeah. And so they said, well, do you have to sign up for that? And I didn't know, but I think, I think you should for the staff, for Fred's purposes. She shouldn't expect to have me come in at some, just unannounced and say, hey, I want to learn how to use this sewing machine.
It's that laser machine.
Right, I mean, do you require appointment to use that equipment? I don't know anything about a 3D printer. I would love to learn how to use a 3D printer, but I would think, you would want some advanced knowledge that a novice was gonna come in and try to use this incredible piece of furniture. I mean, do you require appointments?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's been a challenge is having like staffed hours with people who are able to just someone comes in off the street and says, so we have there's a biweekly program on Friday mornings that I'm running, which is introductory sewing, and it builds every week, skill building. And this is just a placemat that we made in it the other week. So there's lots of structured ways through programming that we're teaching those skills, and then also we are having both by appointments and as walk-ins, walking people through the basics. We also have Niche Academy, the platform that we have as training modules. We've also made a sort of a video course if you just need to use if you use a different sewing machine and you just want to learn, oh, how do I thread the bobbin on this machine? It kind of gets you from start to physics, so you can sort of hit the ground running when you come in as well. So there's a couple of different.
But also that's slightly different in Nelson County where they don't have somebody in the room. So you have to go through a training course in advance before you can go into the room and use anything in there. You have to go through a module there.
Right, but again, in the policy world, some of this is communication and especially when we start talking about that the usage guidelines differ from branch to branch, that to me doesn't belong at the policy level. So,
but I think the why.
Yeah, I also kind of, sounds like we're all sort of.
Yeah, it sounds like the 3 board members certainly feel that way, and that's a compelling argument.
Yeah.
Okay,
so normally our process is to try and develop some bullet points of what would be included in such a policy. I think we've kind of just done that.
Yeah.
So time permitting, someone in the room will maybe work on a draft that addresses those bullet points. But again, just make sure everybody's on the same page. I think we're talking about a high level purpose and scope, and keep the prescriptive details out of it so that there can be flexibility, and also maintain flexibility for whether we offer, at what level we offer those services is going to be dependent on funding and other things. So we want to not be too prescriptive about that we must do these things, but more of a why we're doing this thing in some instances.
This is normally where I look at Camille, but since Brett and I are knee deep in this, I think they're gonna volunteer us to come up with some language by the October board meeting, policy committee meeting.
And just sort of keeping in mind that like there's scale operations expenditure if we want to like significantly increase like service.
So again, it's gotta be broad to say, here's why, here's we offer on a resource availability basis, we offer these makerspace services. Here's what we hope to achieve by doing that and why it ties into our. One of the, I think it was Loudon maybe, that had a pretty good statement. It said something about, we want you to exercise creativity and learn from one another. So that's, and I'm paraphrasing part of that, but the learn from one another fits very closely, I think, with some things from our mission. So that would be the kind of
And are the resources available in these maker spaces? Are they, do they come from patrons that donate? Or
Sometimes we have had some, yeah, but the bulk of it has come from Friends funding or from the Friends Endowment support.
But you primarily it's staff that's seeing things that might be useful, popular, that you request those, right? Because we get requests staff from the friends to be.
Yes, so staff would ask when we do in the spring, either an equipment budget request or a Friends Endowment request, they would make a request for, we need.
And it could be
3D
something
printer.
that's a patron says,
Sure.
actually, because consistent with the others. Equipment.
Yeah, like one of the ones that we were talking about before the meeting it came from like a patron suggestion. And then I think it's a really lovely way to give back to the library that people know about often. There was a 3D printer that was donated to Nelson. I think helped the staff sort of get comfortable with it before they got their budget requests that came in. And there's also someone who donated the sewing machine. It really allowed us to like expand into classes because it's hard with only one machine to have multiple people using it at once. It's sort of like it's ways in which they've made it our capacity. I like really want to just shout out all the wonderful patrons.
And frankly, we could use some lower tech sewing machines because the newer ones all are like computerized and high tech. And when there's a problem with them, it's not as simple as like, oh, this thing is bent, you need to fix it. It's send it off to a shop.
Category of volunteer.
Yeah.
There are volunteers that fix sewing machines.
Or operational budget in terms of like for
Does the equipment, like the 3D printers, do they get broken?
just like any other piece of equipment, just like the stool in the children's room where
So that's
The current batch of 3D printers are our IT folks identified a local-ish group that does support for them, basically. They're in Richmond and they'll come and fix things that are out of our hand. There's some minor troubleshooting that Fred and their staff can take care of, but when it breaks, it's melting plastic the whole time. So there's a high likelihood that it gets jammed up.
routine by team. I mean, that's.
If I went to use it, trust me. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that this committee would like to see a draft policy at a very broad level that kind of articulates why the library is offering this service and has a few pointing people in the right direction.
And how it supports our mission.
How it supports the mission. That's the easy part, I think.
Okay, great. So we'll see if kind of a starting point for that in 2 months. Okay, next is policy 1.23, JMRL board committees. And this, David, remind me if I'm correct, I think it's not, or scroll to the bottom maybe, when was this last reviewed? Yeah, so we're not on the 10-year schedule here, but this sort of flowed out of some discussions within the technology committee, where the technology committee was sort of reviewing its own scope and purpose and want to define the description within this, this is where technology committee has come up with its own definition of those things and wanted that to be updated here. So if you scroll down to the red, this is the exact language that has been proposed by the technology committee. So they're recommending it to us. And we can look at that in detail in a minute, but it seems to me if we're making changes along those lines, if we might as well look at the other pieces and parts of this at the same time. So strategic plan, David also sent to sort of communicated with Meredith, the trustee chair of that committee, and she reviewed it and came back with no, suggested changes. And then the other committee that's mentioned in this policy is the policy committee, which is us. So I think it's worth looking through this 1.6 and see if we have tweaks to make. I had intended to, because I have some thoughts and I had intended to write them down a little more specifically, but I got distracted and didn't do it. So I think today we could talk through each one and sort of in a bullet point format. If there's changes and back in 2 months with the actual language in front of us. Unless, David, there's some reason why we need to be faster.
No, my only concern about, we just added a new policy to do, and this is a new one, is that we do have a calendar year time frame for some other policies. So I think we can manage this.
But this kind of needs to be done to get the technology
Yes.
stuff in place anyhow.
I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk through 1 through 6. Review JMRL policies to ensure they are in compliance with state and federal laws. Thumbs up. Review JMRL policies to keep them in compliance with updated American Library Association recommendations.
Change the it to them, though, I agree.
To them. So this one I have some, I think the phrasing, it would serve us to broaden the phrasing a little bit, because we have some places in, I think in mission and values where we say there are specific ALA policies that we endorse, the freedom to read principles and so forth. But there's nowhere that says, hey, blanket pre-approval in advance. If the ALA says it, then so shall it be done here at JMRL. And in fact, we had a year or two ago a situation where there was some language with the ALA that we thought did not meet our needs precisely, and so we tweaked that and came up with our own version of that. So to me, this would be more about keep abreast of ALA recommendations to inform our own policy making efforts, something along those lines.
I guess it depends on what the word compliance means here,
I think you could just change it to be consistent with us.
or in alignment with, or something like that. Compliance to me, let me ask my lawyer,
Sounds legal, yeah.
Needs to be,
to do these
Right.
things, right?
As opposed to.
Yeah, so we want to say that, yes, we
it
are.
reads no differently than the first one. You do have to.
So the ALA recommendations don't have the weight of state and federal law.
No.
But we want to be in line with how, American libraries are.
Yeah, I'm just cautious about pre-approving that whatever the ALA does, we
Yeah.
must fall in line in precise fashion, because that now our governance we're being governed somewhere else.
I would just say in line with or consistent.
Definitely
Keep them
change out
consistent,
compliance.
But something like for consistency with.
Keep them consistent.
Keep them consistent.
It also means that we're not on the same update schedule as the ALA, so it might mean that we have to update at random times that we're not necessarily.
We don't necessarily get that information.
So that's another thing that you may want to,
That's a good point.
who's gonna make sure that we're paying attention to all their updates?
Well, who make sure we're in compliance with state and federal law.
That's my job.
Thank
That's
you.
different, I think, than ALA.
Yeah, I think just this word keep is also has some of these schedule related connotations that you're discussing, so.
Could be like when reviewing policies,
Yeah,
ensure they're in alignment with ALA recommendations.
That's pretty good.
I think of ALA as more of an advisory role than, I guess that's where I would like us to be in relation to them. We take them into account and we're advised by them, but it's not a required thing. That's where I would like to, that's where I personally would like the language to kind of.
But I like
Okay.
what you just said. You could just say, review the JMRL policies so that they are in alignment with ALA recommendations. Take out the updated too.
It says review for alignment with.
That's much less mandatory than.
Although that I had the same concern there with what Krista just mentioned, I liked Camille's language because it was more like as we are reviewing or things come up, where if there's a new, so if we're gonna have we're gonna have this brand new makerspace policy, we don't have a current makerspace policy. We would want to go and see if they have guidance on that. My experience is that the ALA doesn't actually have a lot of here's some boilerplate language for policies. They have some very, like the freedom to read, some very, very broad ones, but when JMRL is looking for policies, we're much more likely to reach out to resources around the state.
We have things with around intellectual freedom, for
Yeah.
sure. There's the
It's
tool,
very specific
policy
concept
toolkit.
areas, right?
Yeah.
But things like this or code of conduct or the policies that we use on a regular basis, I don't think that they have a repository of them in the same way that the state has been keeping statewide.
I think this just says when you're reviewing it, because we're about to, one of the future bullet points, we're going to talk about the schedule of review. So I think to me, it means when we're reviewing, consult the ALA. I think that's.
Yeah.
Maybe we come back to this and see if we need to tweak
The JMRL policies for alignment with American Library Association recommendations. That's pretty good.
Okay, number 3, so 3 and 4 and 5, all the rest of these are sort of, here's what we do, here's what I think we do in practice. In practice, we have a scheduled review, a regular scheduled review of policies, and right now it's 10 years, although we've talked for a number of years about maybe having different review periods for different policies. So, things that are technological might be a 5-year. And that would be, if we ever put that in place, it would be defined on a policy by policy basis. So for that reason, I'm not sure what I would think about putting 10 years of written policy here, but we do have definitely we do have a regular concept of regularly visiting things on a regular basis. Secondly, sometimes it does come from another committee. Hey, technology is saying for us right now, hey, do our own work, we'd like support for this. And then sometimes things come up as a hot topic because it's something that staff is bumping up against or bringing to our attention, or it's just in the air or the media or what have you. So I think there should be room for taking on ad hoc issues that the committee decides are relevant, like the Supreme Court gets to choose which cases it takes. And then we make so then 3, I would use the word recommend somewhere, recommend revisions to policy. I think that would be, we just said.
Doesn't this cover that? Advise the JMRL Board of Trustees when revisions need to be made.
Yeah, I guess we usually end up
recommending
We
a
usually-
new policy.
We usually recommend the change. Here's what we came up with, and we're recommending you do
It needs
this.
to be revised, and here's what we recommend.
Yeah. So it's not just, hey, we think something needs to happen about this. This is what we're.
But ultimately, the power is the board's.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that should be clear somewhere here.
That's in number 4, isn't it?
And 5.
5.
Yeah.
So I think they all work together.
Well, 4 is not. Yeah, I guess what's missing from here, so first of all, I think some of these could probably be just consolidated together. And secondly, the concept of a regular schedule is how do things come across our desk, so to speak, that we're talking about it this month, and it's.
I mean, I
because
think,
it's a schedule for.
I think we could cut 6.
Yeah.
I think that's a holdover from when every branch had a binder, a 3-ring binder, and it was the policy committee's job to
Yeah.
make sure that the, you
I got the old one, put in the
take
new
out
one. Yeah.
the non-app policy and put in the makerspace policy. So physically, something was happening that this committee was responsible for.
That's procedural.
I think, Mike, for 5, we add some language about timeliness, like on a regular schedule, something like that. I'd be okay with saying at least a 10-year schedule, because that's the standard.
Yeah, minimum.
Then I think the rest of them, while the language is not great, I think they can. We're advising them. We're doing new policies and revisions when requested to do so by the board or the director. And we're reviewing them on a timely basis. I mean, it's not like exactly how our workflow is, but to your point earlier about being too prescriptive, like we have a new policy committee in 5 years, they might have a different way of approaching them.
Okay, so what would be, what's our next steps here? Do we want to, because I'm just mindful that we're at the end of today's meeting. I don't feel super comfortable redlining things and showing them to the board today, I guess is the bottom line. So I think I would, given that, I would say, let's come to our next meeting with a final draft, which might just be what David's doing right now. And our goal would be at the end of that meeting to have a approved or recommended version.
Yeah.
So if anyone has, because you're all sort of reading this, we're reading this together for the first time. So between now and 2 months, if you have your own wording tweaks, then send them in to David or edit or comment in this form directly. We'll review all comments next time.
So the next time,
Our goal will be to finalize by the end of the
and then
meeting.
offer it to the board.
Yep. Okay, last item is just to basically flash on the screen, policy 1.7 records retention.
Okay,
We have
speaking,
5 or 10 minutes. We have a few minutes.
yeah, we've got a few minutes. So, but speaking of policy 1.23, section C1, review JMRL policies to ensure they are compliant with state and federal law. The next policy is effectively a legal document. This is largely cribbed from what, at least 10 years ago, the state's guidance on records retention was, and that gets updated regularly, but this has not been updated since then. So while there is a lot here, and it gets very detailed, this is largely taken from the states. And my concern is new technologies that aren't addressed here, whether there are things that this has email, but, are there new guidance on chat that staff might use or any other record produced? And then reviewing this with our legal counsel. That's my main concern, making sure that gets signed off on as a good standard. So I also think this is one that we could maybe work on between now and October and potentially have a draft.
Yeah, I think, to me, it sounds like I'm not interested in reading each one and weighing in personally if I think the email should be 30 days or 3 years or whatever, because as you said, that's coming from.
Does that statute, is it detailed like that?
I'm not sure, I'd have to go look specifically at it. But this all came from either code specifically, that statute, or some sort of FOIA guidance. Yeah, the state records department, which is the state library.
And the ALE also had recommendations.
ALA has recommendations, yeah.
Record
We would
retention.
need the state one, so
We would
wouldn't,
need state. what the state
wouldn't
law.
the Library of Virginia be able to just tell us what the new ones are and we can just go from there?
Maybe,
Maybe?
we could ask. Yeah. Another thing for staff here is that if you notice, we have a procedure that's almost exactly as as detailed. And to me, we don't need both of those things. So this is a,
Right, do we need to go into detail with all of these if we're doing that in the procedures and just say,
Well-
this is what we're following?
Just be the.
We follow this,
Our retention, record retention must
in
be,
line with the legal.
yeah,
yeah.
and not go into detail.
Must reflect or mirror the state requirement. That's all. That's all you
Essentially, the
need.
first paragraph revised.
And if somebody has a question about a specific
Yeah, we can always share a procedure with them.
interlibrary loan fees, files, or security notice.
Yeah, there's a very detailed page on the Library of Virginia with schedules for retention.
Yeah, maybe that's where this
And
came
when
from.
was it last updated?
Unclear.
Okay, so I think I would look to you, David, at whatever schedule permits. Do the research step, talk to possibly the insurance group, if you think that's applicable. Sounds like the state should certainly be consulted. And then ultimately our legal probably should sign off on whatever. That should maybe be the final step.
These are like backwards. The procedure is more
General,
like broad,
okay.
you know, like here's why. Promote the efficient and economic management of library records, and the policy is, yeah, like here's what to do with this piece of paper from this person.
So I would just ask the state, that would be one question I would have for state or other legal advisors. How much of this needs to be spelled out at a policy level versus procedure. I do think, in my hat of making sure we're communicating to the public, I do think it should be written down somewhere. If I'm a public and I'm
Ask for it.
I'm asking you for your email, I should be able to feel like you didn't make up on the spot, oh, we don't keep that for that long. I should be able to see in advance.
In the procedural.
Yeah, I kind of like your suggestion, and just saying that the board saying that this needs to be compliance with the code of the state of Virginia.
Yeah, the first paragraph revised.
Then procedure, I also don't, we have done this a few times recently, has made the procedure publicly available on our webpage right next to the policy so that people can find it.
So maybe you can, in conjunction with your research staff, think about what you would propose as the best structure for that, and then we'll talk about it in a few months.
Do patrons ask for this?
No, but they might ask for they'll ask for a record.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
usually.
If you want to do a FOIA, you're gonna want to know what can I expect to be able to.
Spoil covers any, I mean, it's like overarching.
Do you
So-
get slates?
Periodically, but we also have a very, very long and detailed FOIA policy that covers all, you know, and procedures. And
Cover any of
it
these
doesn't
things.
cover how long we need to keep certain records, you know, but it covers how FOIA responds.
Yeah, I mean, we need the detail somewhere.
How long do we
When I'm
need to
thinking
FOIA?
files out, I'm like, okay, how long do I need to keep this item? But like, I don't know, it needs to be.
I don't think FOIA requests are on that records retention. How long do we need to keep them?
I think they fall under like the administrative,
Yeah.
you know, administrative documentation. something.
Okay, so we got a lot going on between now and next
In October,
October, it sounds like, full
some of us do.
list already.
It doesn't even have anything to do with the policy committee, right?
Great.
Okay, anything else for today? All right, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you all.